Welcome to Kay Griggs, first of all. Hello, Kay. Can you hear me all right?
Can you hear me? I'm at another phone.
Oh, you sound like you're just fine.
Oh, good.
Not a problem. Good connection. Your story has been up, written by the just superb writer, Greg Szymanski.
He really is.
He is a man who has dialed into an awful lot of crucial truths lately and has written and presented those truths with extraordinary acumen, and it's amazing to read his works. Time after time, he continues to produce remarkable journalism. You've been talking about your story now, and it is quite a story, for over 10 years. I guess 11 years now.
Well, not really in the press, just to friends around here, and because I didn't realize it was on the internet until just recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, it's there, my dear, and you're famous now. When did you first go into a public format, a public venue with this? I mean, seriously, I know you did a radio program a long time ago, but was, I guess, Greg's article, or who was first to really put you in print?
Well, I honestly don't know. I had death threats, and when I went up to Washington, I was invited up, sort of a safe house, and to talk to some, I guess they were intelligence people at the press club who were friends of the senior White House correspondent, Sarah McClendon.
Yes.
Who knew I was telling the truth, and I had spoken to William Colby, who was a friend of my Uncle Ben's. They were at Princeton together and also in the same secret society or eating club that my husband was. And I felt very secure having talked to William Colby after the death threats and the house break-ins and everything. And then when he was missing, his canoe was turned over and he was gone, I felt really insecure, and that's when I just really, I guess, went haywire and started calling people I thought I could trust, and I got Sarah.
Well, you got a great one.
I lived with her for a long time up there, and
what an amazing woman.
She saved my life, really, literally.
Well, her work over the decades has probably saved the lives of many people.
Oh, she really has. She was just the greatest kind of patriot, just like my grandmother, and really sincere and highly respected. Well, I think people feared her truth.
I think you're right. I had her on the program once some years ago now. She's still active?
She died last year, sadly.
But
that was some funeral at the press club. It was just totally jam-packed.
I wondered if she was still active. I didn't know.
Yeah, she just died. She's in her 90s.
Yeah, I know.
Brilliant.
I think she was on the program when she was 86 or something like that.
Yeah, just great.
Well, anybody who's watched television in the past, how many years was she sitting in the front row at those White House press conferences?
She was there from the Roosevelt administration.
Right. She talked about that, as I remember. And she was the
first one who sort of got women into the press club because it was an all-male enclave, and Sarah and Helen Thomas, they were sitting in the, upper regions, just like African Americans used to do in the churches, and it was Margaret Thatcher who said, "Why are they up there?" And it really Margaret Thatcher working with Sarah, and anyway, they finally got women to be allowed to become members.
Now, for our listeners, let me just read a little bit from Greg Szymanski's article about what we're going to discuss to give them an idea, a little bit of background. For 11 long years, Kay Griggs heard all the messy details from her military husband, usually while he was drinking, before going into one of his drunken stupors. First going public in 1998, in an 8-hour video interview with a truth-seeking Michigan pastor and FM radio broadcaster, she is now back after September 11th to warn Americans to beware of the evil, and boy is it, lurking within the highest levels of government, bound and determined to destroy this country. Kay Griggs knows what it's like to have a gun pointed in her face. She knows what it's like to have her face slapped, her bones broken, and her nose bloodied by her former bully of a husband, an active Marine colonel. and a man who she claims is above the law and literally gets away with murder, end quote. This is a story, Kay, that is probably going to be almost unbelievable for some people, but that's okay, because most of this audience will be right with you every step, so just know that you're talking to an incredibly enlightened group.
Well, it's true. They feel they're totally above the law, and it's a brotherhood in which they protect each other.
Now, is this brotherhood? It's certainly not restricted to the U.S. Marine Corps.
No, but the Marine Corps, there's a group within the Marine Corps who have gone to Princeton and Annapolis and so forth, who are in the upper echelon of the Marine Corps. You wouldn't have found an Oswald in this group, although he was in the 4th Marines, but it has to do with friendships and where they went to school and the secret society or the eating club that they went to and which college. And then there are associations and in Vietnam and, the SHAPE, NATO, SACLANT, Defense College at Rome, experiences. And I really believe that the NATO, Rummy went to NATO when the Nixon world was falling in, and which saved him and protected him. It's an international brotherhood, and it is Masonic, very much Masonic.
So it is the Masons, but again, for you Masons out there, it's something way above the levels you're familiar with. Now, this group.
Well, the Freemasons have a ladder.
Yeah. And
they're always climbing because they're very insecure.
Huh.
And they can't, it's addictive. They just want to get another medal, to make themselves feel competent, because they don't.
This is above 33rd degree.
Yeah. Their orders. He had all sorts of medals. Steiner, Carl Steiner and Mark Clark. It's
General Mark Clark.
Yeah, he was very corrupt, believe it or not.
Ah, another American hero.
Well,
so to speak.
So to speak.
Yeah. So who are these people? It's an international group. The so-called Illuminati, the globalists, the New World Order.
Yeah.
Are these people, this particular group, are they an enforcement arm of this Illuminati? How do they tie in? Do you know?
They are. Well, they're connected with the Joint Chiefs and the NSA and the White House. But George told me that they wear different hats, and it really doesn't matter what hat they wear.
I see.
He had different passports with different names. I felt as though he may have even had a double, but certainly he admired Rummy, and he even had a stand tall desk when he was at FMF Land, just because it was something, it's like something Rummy had. He had a driver like Ike had, like Kay Summersby. He just was, I don't know, bless his heart, very insecure and robotic.
Well, it's nice of you to speak to him that kindly after the life you led. How many years? We have to go to a break. How many years were you married?
Well, we were married for 11, but he disappeared the last couple of years. He was, it was a very strange divorce.
I understand. Okay, the 11 years wasn't, you were married, but it wasn't a marriage as we know it.
Well, it was for a while. It was like Gunther Rossbacher's sort of marriage.
Oh, yeah, I know all about Gunther. All right.
But George was like Gunther, but he didn't have to go abroad. I spoke to Gunther one time.
Yeah, interesting. All right. Stand by. We'll be right back with Kay Griggs, our first two special guests tonight. let's get right back to our special guest, Kay Griggs. I want to, if I may, Kay, if you don't mind, I'd like to read just a little bit more from Greg's article to not only acknowledge him, but to give our listeners a little bit of
sure, that's fine.
A feeling of the breadth of this incredible panorama of horrible things you were exposed to for a long time. After renting the main portion of her house to Colonel Griggs, the couple dated for 2 months and were quickly married, a speedy decision the young bride would quickly learn to regret. The story of the couple's courtship is of little importance, but what happened afterwards regarding the Colonel's drunken ramblings takes center stage. Said Kay, he started drinking, did a lot of heavy drinking, and at first I thought I could change him. Said Griggs, who listened closely over the years about her husband's role as a military assassin and his role as a military trainer who brought new young assassins into the fold. Again, Kay Griggs. He started talking openly about murder, corruption, assassinations, and lies. It was just incredible, the names that were involved and the people who were being killed.
Yeah.
He gave me very detailed and graphic descriptions about how Waco was carried out, as well as how many other hits went down, including Malcolm Kerr, the head of the American University in Beirut, and Ron Brown, who was trying to take away the State Department's monopoly on drug money and arms deals. Now, there are several things to talk about right there. Let's first...
There's so much of that going on that people don't realize as far as buying and selling weapons. And, for instance, we were in France one Christmas I think it was 95, and he had prearranged a meeting with an Australian Brit and a Chilean member of their Secret Service who had a place there, and we were at a place called Castelnau de Montmiral for 2 weeks. And the guy was an arms dealer, and in other words, they will sell American weapons through an Israeli group, and it's to confuse people. They will use the Israelis. Americans will use the Israelis, or rather, the Israelis will use the Americans.
Right.
And then they have people like there was a couple of men, Gorbani Far and another guy who were friends of George's, because George had, of course, been to the Hun school with the Saudi royals.
Now that's HUN, the Hun school.
Yeah, and you know the king just passed away, but try to find out in the press about the 3 royals who went to the Hun school and then to Princeton. It's rather hard, but if you contact the school, they'll tell you about it. And in other words, these early friendships that George and guys like Bob Edwards had in high school, and then going to Princeton and getting into Cap and Gown, which was the one Rummy was in, and Colby, and Schultz, Carlucci, Dulles, Alan Dulles. It's a very small group, and Dulles, I believe Alan Dulles was the one who really was responsible for bringing Rummy in, Carlucci in, my husband in. My Uncle Ben had been in that club as a football star, and I thought it was God. I just thought, well, George coming into my life, it was just exactly the same. Those were the hoops that my Uncle Ben had gone through, and his parents were killed. But George's parents were just sent away for 8 years. So, I began to connect the dots and think, these are young boys who don't have parents. They're poor. Although Uncle Ben had a little bit of money, but once his parents died, it was gone. And they're all on scholarship. They're all dependent on ROTC scholarships. They have no careers like the wealthy guys at Princeton. So they're really dependent on the political, military hoops and people to promote them. And Alan Dulles really pretty much oversaw their initial getting into political spheres of power.
I think the underlying point here is that murder means nothing to the power brokers at the top, and it is commonly used as a political, economic, and terrorism device. The true terrorists, anytime and anywhere they want, it seems.
Mm-hmm. It's arm's length. It has nothing to do with the politicians who want the person or the intelligence high-level person who wants to get rid of this troublesome guy. And they're all, in other words, they were German individuals who, and I'm not opposed to, Germans are fine, but there were a lot of German SS who came into this country. I know because my grandfather was involved with that as a naval intelligence doctor here in Norfolk during World War II, and I never thought about that. But when George was talking to me, and I knew his family were German, and I started thinking, well, you're killing people, and this is, in other words, it was institutionalized, what he was talking about.
All right, I understand. Structural to the system.
Yes, vital to the system.
Vital to the system.
Yeah.
All right, Ron Brown. What is your understanding about how Ron Brown was killed? Of course, that whole plane was brought down, and everyone.
A lot of these Georgia would talk about plane crashes and how easy they were, just ways to get rid of a small number of people. He said it's much better to have a plane crash than to have a war. Or, in other words, he was rationalizing and saying that plane crashes were normal special operations that they did in order
surgical precision to remove
He called them
problems.
surgical. He used words like surgical and neutralization, and but in other words, it was just a matter-of-fact thing, and it just had to be done, quote unquote.
I understand. All right, stand by, Kay. If you would, we have to take a very short break. We'll come right back and hear more from Kay Griggs. Welcome back. Talking with Kay Griggs. Kay, if I might, I want to go back to the Ron Brown assassination and plane crash, which killed, I think, close to 50 people altogether, something like that. Individual researchers working very hard put together a very plausible scenario about how that plane was brought down with incorrect ground data in terms of bad weather. They flew it into the top of a hill. Apparently the first people on the scene found at least one survivor in the back of the plane, a military stewardess named, I think, Shelley Kelly, who apparently was walking around. She died after being evacuated, allegedly from a loss of blood, very mysterious. Ron Brown said to have been found with a hole in the top of his head. The autopsy films of his examination, of course, have been kept sealed. We've never seen them. There was a picture or two leaked, which was highly suggestive. What do you know about the Ron Brown assassination?
Well, just tying together the things that George talked about, plane crashes, it was I won't say a popular, he mentioned things like signature murders, and he explained to me how the Marines would, they had different patterns that they would leave marks so that the snipers, shooters, or whomever, the dirty tricks, wet ops people would know who did it. It was kind of
a little signature
thing.
Yeah, I see it.
Like Paul Wellstone's plane and Ashcroft's opponent and Dick Openchain in Virginia. I mean, they're just all over the place.
Well, the Wellstones were clearly murdered. That plane.
Sonny Bono, was it Sonny Bono? Not Sonny Bono. John Denver, the group that formed the critical mass
John Denver
landmines.
Lost in the Pacific when his small stunt plane crashed. Sonny Bono said to have been murdered on the ski slopes as well.
All over the landmine issue with Diana, because that's a growth industry in the Navy in Texas. And they had formed a sort of a critical mass, and within a matter of months they were...
the movement was decapitated.
Yeah. And that's what he said they had to do. They don't like critical masses that threaten something that is profitable or political that is important to them.
Are they guarding their own worth and value, or are they doing the work of those they are associated with? Or is it both?
Well, it's certainly a combination of both, because they feel as if they are the group. It's very I don't know how to when people go through initiations in the Masons or the shell the ceremonies that are really kind of gross, but they bond the boys. They're drunk, and it's a memorable experience, if you could say that.
Well, you wouldn't forget it easily, that's for sure.
Yeah. But it's a form of kind of bonding, and it's what gave Lehman the courage to do what he did at Tailhook with all the Marines looking on. We won't tell, and if somebody does tell, then they disappear, or they're neutralized, or they're ruined. So they just are afraid. But it's also
they have a lot. They have a lot to fear, but on the edge of fear is, I was going to say, a certain high, a certain, because you're on the inside cutting edge. You're there. It doesn't get any giddier than that, does it?
No, and they have affairs. Bob Oakley and Gates, and all these guys who are, Buck Revell. They pal around with, Tom Clancy's part of the group, and they do things, and nobody will talk because they know that it's like Jerry Unruh. I mean, everybody sort of knows that they're messing around one
What you're
way or
saying
the other.
is they're homosexuals, they're pedophiles, there is no end of the
absolutely.
the
Ben Bradley, Warner, all the Marines, Hassan Foos and North. I mean, the Kallstrom. It's a very small group, and they've been in operations together, sort of like the Delta Team 1 in Italy, with the boss and so forth. That they went to Rome, and Steiner was involved with.
But this group was preceded by another group, and a group before that. This is nothing new.
The Dulles group,
The Dulles brothers, and And you mentioned Germans coming over here. Well, Paperclip, of course, we know brought scientists, but there were other operations.
Well, it was a huge operation, and I know right much about that in Virginia because my grandfather Byrd was a naval intelligence high-level person during World War II. He was a doctor, and he spoke German. He was brilliant. He was an obstetrician. And I know a lot about what's gone on in Norfolk, and since World War II and up through the 80s. When I found out the same thing goes on in other ports, and organized crime is totally involved in it, naturally.
Kay, how is it that you're on the program talking with me tonight? How is it that you've escaped being silenced, ruined, sent away, whatever?
His first wife was murdered, and I think that Suzanne Workman Griggs, was killed during the Iran-Contra hearings because George was North's handler for Al Gray for the joint...
Your ex-husband was Ollie North's handler?
Yeah, I mean, he was the chief of staff for the Marine Corps, for Gray's boys, the assassins who were working with Steiner, Jim Joy and Brute Krulak, and they were working with, the Nelson Rockefeller group in the Republican Party. But I'm not saying that Republicans are bad, because there were actually folks working both sides, like Walt Rostow and
Boy, you're dropping so many names.
No, but they're all.
No, I understand what you're telling me, but it's almost deafening. Everyone is another bomb. And if I can go back to former CIA Director William Colby, your friend.
Yeah, he was a friend of my uncle's, a good friend, and a really nice man whom I spoke with when after March the 4th, when I had called General Joy and wanted to find my husband because I had no money.
That was during the latter years of your marriage when he disappeared.
And General Joy said, I don't believe I know your husband. And I just was looking at his diary in Beirut when he was, with Bob Oakley and Bob Gates and Larnaca and, every day with Joy and Steiner. And then when I told him I had the diary, he couldn't wait to meet me, and that's another story entirely. You wouldn't believe that. But then my house was broken into, and I was set up by a NATO person named Fred Hens.
Okay, hold on right there. House broken into, looking for the diary, I would assume. We have to do a little bit of a break here, Kay. This is amazing. Stand by, we'll come right back. And back with Kay Griggs, just to underscore the point that no one is secure. Former CIA Director William Colby, as I recall, Kay, was about to testify at some Senate or House committee, and I was concerned at that point in time that we were about to hear some amazing news, and the news we heard was he was dead, and allegedly what happened, as I know it, and correct me if this story is incorrect, but the common perception is that on a cold and rainy night, he got up from his comfortable desk around 11 o'clock in the evening and went out for a canoe paddle.
He had dinner uneaten, and his computer was turned on.
Yeah. Supposedly went out for a canoe ride. That was the official story, and he turned over and he drowned.
Well, I went to a cocktail party in Virginia Beach, and I'm not going to mention names, but it was a very high-level cocktail party. And one of the individuals there was part of the Lavender Boy, high-level Lavender Boy network in Norfolk. And I knew, in other words, I talked to him about, this was the topic of conversation for people who really cared to know about this kind of thing, and for me in particular, because he's been a close friend of my uncle's, and he was in the same eating club with my husband, and dying like that, and I'd spoken with him, and he told me not to worry. He said, he was going to help, and I was feeling very secure. And so when he died, when he was missing, I was agitated, and I just was talking with this person, and he couldn't wait to tell me that he had some friends who were SEALs, and that they knew who had done it, but he said that they didn't know it was Colby at the time, but they found out it was Colby. So it was done by some Navy SEALs here at Little Creek who were ordered to do it, and they realized who they'd done, and this is kind of how it works.
Wow.
It's
pretty amazing. All right.
Well,
William Colby gone. When Senator Wellstone's plane went down, you were well aware of the threat that Cheney had made to the senator in several months before the crash, I'm assuming. When the plane went down, the timing of it and all of that probably didn't take you by surprise, did it?
No. And the Ashcroft one didn't surprise me either, but I think because he's a Christian, he says he's a Christian, he didn't take the seat.
Right.
But it's happened to a lot of
he was supposed to tell us that story about Ashcroft briefly.
Well, I don't know that much about Ashcroft, but when I heard it, and then I heard the person who was running against him was in a plane crash, and it was a couple of days before the election, I understand.
Right.
And he could have easily slipped into it, but I think he knew.
That was Mel Carnahan, wasn't it?
I believe, yes, and his wife or his widow stepped in,
Correct.
and it was like the one in Louisiana, she's a columnist, and her mother was the ambassador to the Vatican. But I believe he was in a plane crash.
So plane crashes are one of the chosen methods of removing
Absolutely
problems.
are, according to George. And, there were people like General Andrews. I have a friend who's kind of a little spooky, but she's the only granddaughter of Andrews Air Force Base, General Andrews. And the family know that he was murdered. This was a long time ago in the 40s.
Well, going back to Secretary Forrestal, I mean, there's so many.
And Forrestal was a Princeton guy.
In the club, too, huh?
Mm-hmm.
And General Patton?
Well, Patton was done by the Mark Clark's group because of his discovery of all the things that they were doing with paintings, and I'm sure there were a lot of other reasons.
Right.
But he was basically an honest guy, Patton.
Right. Well,
and a truth teller, and he knew that Clark had done all sorts of nefarious things, and I'm not saying that Clark didn't have some good, but from what I know, he was a really bad guy.
Yeah.
But of course, my whole family have been naval officers.
Well, have you talked to your ex-husband in the last several years at all?
No, I just communicate a little bit with his daughter and son-in-law.
Kay, who's watching over you? Who's taking care of you?
Well, I believe the reason I'm alive, and this is what people believe too, is because I spoke up right away.
When Sarah told you to.
When Sarah told me to do that. And also because his first wife was murdered, and I went to the NIS with her death certificate, which everyone was told that Sue had a heart attack. But I was told by someone, and I'm not going to mention, a very high-level person, very high-level person, who was official, that Sue had gone ballistic over some things that George was involved in, and particularly after a trip to Florida, which George told me about, and she was really going ballistic, and they brought some friends, the Earls. There was one brother who was with the NSA, and then Jim and Nancy, to calm her down. And then she had this quote-unquote heart attack, which all the Marine wives said she had. But when I saw the death certificate, which he had hidden in the attic in this black flip thing he had with a lot of other papers in, and I was curious one day and found out that she had a cerebral hemorrhage, and then I asked him over, drinks, he was, what really happened that night, George? And he did not call the rescue squad. This was right at supper time, and he dragged her back to the bedroom. And,
what happened to her in the first place?
Exactly. It was he gave her one of the things that he gave me. He killed her.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
And I told that to the man. Well, anyway, I told it to two different people, and I finally got a woman at Oceana who was at NCIS, NIS, and I found out she was a Marine. But 3 days later, Sue's body had been dug up and removed, and they, in other words, they must have. I know that they didn't do an autopsy on her body. They just, George got rid of it. Because,
was it some kind of poison? Or did it cause a hemorrhage?
You know, he put things in my coffee. I don't want to go into that because it was just too painful for me to even go into that part of it. But it was just, it was like a movie. It was just, I was struggling. It was just unbelievable. And I knew what she had gone through. And I really believe that's why I'm alive today, or at least I'm alive up to this point.
Why did he leave for those last several years of your, quote, marriage?
Well, he was involved with the Bosnian thing, setting up pre-positioning of weapons in Norway, and that was, he was totally preoccupied with that. Because they knew there was going to be, you know, the war, and
right. Did you hear anything from him about the current state of affairs? How long ago the Iraq, Middle East involvement was planned? Was that ever discussed?
Well, yeah, he discussed a lot about Iran, and the Bekaa Valley and the Israelis, the Tel Aviv Israelis.
What did he think of the Zionist Israelis?
Well, they were totally involved with everything that was going on, because the assassins I met, you see, they have assassins, these duo teams, like the ones who got Bill Cosby's son. And they have an Israeli and an American, and they're usually flamers. They're usually homosexuals. And I met...
they call them flamers? Well,
you know, they have sex with each other, and they're Marines, and they're assassins, they're shooters. And a couple of Christmases, there was a, I don't know what, I should say this or not. I met the mother, the Israeli mother, and this guy. I nearly got him a car. And they were an assassin team. He was an Israeli, and he would do assassinations in the United States because of some sort of jurisdictional thing, and Carl would do it in other places. I mean, they go to Algeria, and they'd hop a plane. And
so it's a homosexual death squad. 2 people.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the 2 couples that I knew about were definitely. I kept trying to get him dates, you know. It was so strange.
Yeah. Well, you finally figured it out. Hold on, if you would, Kay. We have a little break to do here. We'll come back another half an hour to go.
Okay.
You're an amazing woman. Just amazing. Thank you, and stand by. We'll be back. us with Kay Griggs, this first half of the program tonight. Her story, part of it, a tiny, tiny part of it, brilliantly told by journalist Greg Szymanski at the top of Rense.com. I urge you to read it. It is entitled The Evil Lurking Within. Okay, a lot of quick things. Tell us about what you know and what you were told about Waco. Keep it simple, but give us the overview.
Well, George's, the triumvirate, Steiner and Joy, were involved with training operations sometime before in Panama, in and out. They were involved with the CIA, and in other words, they were training special operations men from other countries Americans.
They still are. They're called School of the Americas or something?
Well, no, these were outside of the United States.
I see. Okay, they were training abroad.
And so they had been involved with Noriega on and off for quite some time.
Right.
With the North crowd and so forth.
Yeah,
and
Noriega's still cooling his heels, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but with the Waco, the Carl Steiner and Jim Joy were involved with the attack on Waco in that they brought in their people. These were not Texans. They had their own special people in there who were brought in specifically to do what they did.
Why? What was the danger?
Well, using radios, and this was Jim Joy and Carl Steiner's. This was their thing.
Was this a training operation for them?
Yes, and they did it in Panama. These are just trying out their what they so that the men will know how to do it. It's a bonding kind of thing.
It was a live fire training operation.
Yeah. And they do live fire training all the time out in the desert. And George was the #1 shooter for the Marine Corps for years. And he told me about how they would go out and, I mean, they really are. They're using live bullets and live target practice, and the guys have to, it's escape and evasion, but they use real bullets.
So they turn people loose and hunt them down.
Exactly.
TWA Flight 800. What do you know about that?
Well, that was, and the scuttlebutt around here is that was done, it was a NATO SACLANT game.
That got out of hand?
Or mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And Kallstrom being a Marine,
Oh, Kallstrom was a Marine. Now it makes sense.
See, Kelly, Warner, Ben Bradley, Cordmeyer, Buck Revell, Oliver North, all these guys, and then Armitage trained, SEAL with these guys. And they do operations and have done operations so that when the time comes for promotion, and to cover up this or that, Kallstrom was right there. And I believe that's why the guy Kelly, I know, what was his name, O'Neill, was murdered in 911. Because he knew everything about what was going on.
So they
got rid of him.
He was probably killed before the building ever came down.
Absolutely. I mean, it was his first day on the job.
Oh.
It was Mueller's first day. There were too many.
Right. Understand. This is going on in broad daylight right in front of us all the time. These killings, these plane crashes, these alleged suicides. Remember the Clinton death list? So many people killing themselves by shooting themselves multiple times in the head.
Well, Admiral Borda was killed by a Marine.
Why did they take out Admiral Jeremy Borda?
Because he was going to appear the very next day.
He was going to testify too. I remember that.
Yeah, and I believe it was all about the guys who were coming from other countries, particularly Israel, who were coming to Norfolk, Virginia, and they were being paid for by the government and they were doing operations inside the United States. And I believe that Colby, because I told Colby, I spoke to him on the phone, and I'm not going to say this. I know who was involved with spying on Colby. Just like Nussbaum was across the hall from Vince Foster. There's always somebody with an office across the hall.
They're always watched.
That's exactly right. And
so they shot Vince in the parking lot, is my understanding, and carried him to Fort Marcy and dumped him.
Yeah. Well, Linda Tripp worked for Carl Steiner.
She did?
Yes.
It's all together, isn't it? Linda Tripp.
So did McVeigh.
And Monica Lewinsky. Remember all the ties? None of this is at random, folks.
No, they knew she liked older men and she had that propensity.
Mm-hmm.
They planted her there because she would gravitate towards him and vice versa. And Linda Tripp was an operative. She and her husband were both down there at working with Carl Steiner at the JFK school in Fort Bragg.
What's Steiner doing now?
I have no idea. He's a really bad man.
Mm-hmm.
He's very bad, very evil.
What do you know, Kay Griggs, about Oklahoma City? The bombing?
Well, they had a group down there. One of the Princeton friends of George's, believe it or not, who's in intelligence, they had this big camp there, and they were bringing lots of Iranians, and they were bringing Iranians to
Iraqis.
No, Iranians
too.
Early on.
Well, they were bringing Republican Guard over too, but this is Iranians now. Okay.
But they were bringing. I know they were bringing Iranians. This was back in the 70s, and they were essentially bonding. And they would train. That was one of the places. It was kind of like the place, like Pontchartrain area, where lots of them did that, where they would bring these international visitors, military, and essentially there was it was under the auspices of Carl Steiner.
Who did Oklahoma City?
Steiner and Joy.
Was McVeigh actually executed or just put into deep sleep and carried away? They say he was breathing after he was dead under the sheet.
Well, he was a special guy with Steiner, and he was intelligent, and
was he a throwaway?
They threw Oswald away, but they didn't throw
McVeigh?
No, North.
Okay, Ollie North.
In other words, it depended on who the person was and how special their special friend was. George's special general died, I believe, of natural causes.
Your ex-husband's special general, the man who
took care of him. He died, and he was an Army general, of course, because George said that the old guard runs everything. So,
was there a purging in the military in the Clinton
sure.
years? I remember the one plane crash with about a dozen high-ranking officers.
They murdered an Air Force guy who was going to be the chief of staff of the Air Force in '96. They got rid of the chief CNO of the Navy. 96 was a big purge year.
That's Clinton.
Well, but Clinton
I'm not saying Clinton didn't do it. I'm saying that it occurred on his watch. There was so much murder during the Clinton tenure, it boggles the mind.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot.
And this is more than the Clinton death list, folks. This is within and without the military. The country.
But they went after Clinton. See, I was living with Sarah McClendon during a great amount of that time, including his birthday, and the plane that Clinton, his birthday, he was flying across the United States. He was supposed to be on a plane, and that plane went down. And Clinton, somebody had told Clinton, I heard Sarah say, because she knew a lot of the scuttlebutt that was going on in the White House, because we were going in and out of the White House at that time. And she knew about Linda Tripp and how the gal had been planted there, because Michael Isikoff and the whole group knew about her a year ahead. That there was a movie, Wag the Dog, that was done ahead of the Isikoff story, but the Isikoff story came out because, if you remember, Clinton welcomed what was the guy's name from Palestine, but he wouldn't see Sharon.
Oh, yes, sir.
And immediately after that, that's when the Tripp story came. I mean, the Monica story came out. That
Monica,
was Israeli.
Monica was working for the Zionists.
The Zionists did that.
Right.
And,
okay.
but there's been that tit for tat.
Right, understand. Stand by. You mentioned the movie Wag the Dog. Wow, that's looming more important than ever now as a template. Back in a minute. Hi, we're back. Our final segment tonight is Kay Griggs. It's just a mind-bending, boggling litany of names and places and events that she is, from her experience, shedding new light on, and they're all we're falling into a reality here, Kay Griggs, that is so unsettling for many people. I'm not sure they can handle it, but that's the way it is. Let's spend our last few minutes talking about the Zionist neocons. Now, just for the record, for all of you out there are Jewish Zionists, there are Christian Zionists, there are atheist Zionists. We're talking about Zionism, which has, of course, co-opted Israel and pretty well taken control of much of this country's government. What do you know about Zionism? Wolfowitz, Pearl, all the rest of them. In 6 minutes or so, give us, if you can, a little sketch about the control that group holds over this country.
Well, it's pretty significant, and it goes back a long way. So I don't know where you really want me to begin, whether it's Judah P. Benjamin or Uriah P. Levy and what I believe is the murder of Thomas Jefferson and Adams.
So
the Rothschild element that was involved with them.
The Rothschilds, this does trace back to the Rothschilds of London.
Friendships and Paris.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see the Marines in 1850 something or other, the Marines were, according to George, assassins, and they were paid for by a Masonic lodge in France. They were funded. The money came to fund them and pay for them as sort of protectors of the ships that would go back and forth, in the triangular trade, which were in the Mediterranean.
That's how the Marines got their start on board of ships.
Exactly. And the red stripe, George said, was blood, and they always would run up to the top. Oh, he loved telling that story. And so you had this German-trained major who was really a loser, but he was involved with the murder of John Brown, and he was not well liked, not at all highly respected, because he was a coward. But he worked for this Belmont guy, and he was, remember, Robert E. Lee was involved, was supposed to go and stop the murder of John Brown, but this German guy, who was a Marine major, wound up, through hook or crook, being the quote-unquote commandant of the Marine Corps. His name was Jacob Zetlin. And
Zetlin?
I think it was Zeitl-Lin, maybe. L-I-N.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't an American guy. He'd been involved with helping Judah P. Benjamin, South and stuff. Anyway,
what a grasp of history you have.
He actually literally changed the uniforms to be like the Germans, with the pith helmets and everything. The Rothschilds were funding all these medals and things, and they changed the logo from being a musical instrument to this global New World Order thing, and the motto was the Rothschild coat of arms, sic semper tyrannis.
And this is 100 years ago or more.
Exactly. I mean, he brought in the whole, the globe, the German. It was
all
just,
the symbols. I understand.
And that wasn't what they were. In other words, it was to make them bigger and more important.
Who killed Lincoln?
It was done by a Southern Masonic group, which Judah P. Benjamin was involved with, and some of the Richmond Freemasons. And, it was a small group, actually.
Well, it doesn't take many if they're organized.
No.
The issue, we have a minute left. The issue today of Zionism controlling this government is, I think, becoming more understood by many Americans. It cannot be underestimated.
Exactly.
It's huge. And our ties to Zionist Israel, right back to London, this is a big game, folks. Nothing happens by chance. There really are no accidents. Think of Paul Wellstone and his wife and the two pilots. That plane was taken down by some kind of an electronic weapon, probably in a van on the ground, which froze all of its instruments. It went off course into the trees, knocked off both wings and fuel tanks, and yet the fuselage of that aircraft burned ferociously for hours, and there was no fuel there. So this was a carefully prepared. There were accelerants and incendiaries placed on board. John Kennedy Jr., anything on that in our last minute?
Yeah, I'm sure that was done because he was getting ready to be the head of the JFK school, which is the most important at Harvard. And the guy there were two brothers who were columnists, reporters, and they didn't want him there. And I believe that, and he was also thinking about running for office. I mean, he was magical, like Diana.
Exactly.
And could form. Anybody would follow him.
He could have extricated. He could have extricated America from their grasp, and I've said for years.
Absolutely, and he would have.
Yes, he would have. He would have given America back to Americans. I think I can sum this up by repeating what I've said for years. These people are so evil, so psychopathic, they will take all of us down with them rather than lose control. Is that an accurate statement? I
believe that's the way they are because they're very childish. They're so egocentric.
Oh. Kay, thank you for being
here.
Thank you for being who you are. I look forward to another conversation with you.
Okay. Ciao.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Kay Griggs. Read Greg Szymanski's article about her at the top of Rense.com. You heard it first here. Wow. Just amazing. We'll be back with part 2 of tonight's program. Keep your seatbelts fastened for that. Okay, welcome back. Hope you had a great day. We have a special guest back on the program tonight for part 2. If you were with us on August the 3rd, you remember Kay Griggs was here. Kay has been written about by a number of people, including the outstanding journalist Greg Szymanski, who had a story at Rense.com about her. She has a story that you'll need to go in the archives and hear the first part. Please do. They don't want to spend a whole lot of time on background or trying to go over what we talked about before. There is so much to discuss. We could do many, many programs, but To put it mildly, Kay Griggs has lived a life that few have lived about, and few have lived to talk about, if we want to tell it like it really is. She's been on the inside at the top levels of the U.S. Marine Corps, former presidents, and potentates and kings, and all kinds of people have been into her life through the words and descriptions of her ex-husband, assassinations, murders, drugs, you name it, homosexuality, pedophilia, the whole story. Evil is what Kay Griggs saw and heard about for the better part of 10 years, I guess, or longer. She is now with us tonight, and I think you're there. Are you there, Kay? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I'm here. I sure am.
Hi, welcome back.
Thank you.
Can you just, for our listeners who missed the first program, you were married for how long, to whom? Just go over the basics for us, and then we'll get right into it.
Well, I was working at the Chamber of Commerce and met my husband-to-be, who was a widower, and he rented a house for me, and it was just after the Iran-Contra, or really during the Iran-Contra hearings, and he, unbeknownst to me, had been involved in all of that, and he was being sort of moved from one job to another, kind of tamping him down a little bit, and he was training SEALs and joint assassins at the Little Creek Naval Base School, which trained people from other countries and all kinds of, in other words, SEALs and Marines, and they did operations together.
Right.
And his first wife had died during the Iran-Contra hearings, and anyway, I met him then and didn't really like him at first, but after a number of months, I was in charge of some Norwegians. A couple of ambassadors were coming to Virginia Beach, and I was involved with organizing a program for a sister city program, and he helped drive one of the ambassadors around, and that's when I first talked to him, because he just didn't talk.
Uh-huh.
But he was just, he was an officer and that kind of thing, and I think he was anxious to marry, and
you say anxious to marry. What do you think the reason for that was? What was he anxious
I think I was sort of a high-profile person here in Norfolk. I think he needed cover.
Uh-huh. I got that. Something was in your word there that made me ask. So, well, if you were, and he did need that, he sounded like he got the perfect cover.
Yeah, he did. And I was totally unaware that a world like his existed.
As most people are, and it's something that is available to probably a tiny fraction of 1% on the planet. They just don't know.
Yeah.
You heard about it, and through your courageous willingness to talk about it, it's been written about. The story is coming out. Now, of course, since they control the mainstream media, your story isn't going to go very far. They know that. But you do have on this program and on my website and others a tremendous number of those who are aware and who are interested in reality. And so that's to your everlasting credit that you've had the courage to come forward with this. Now, he reached the rank of what in the Marines?
Well, it's really funny because I tried to get him to he was telling me about what he did for a living, but he told me that he really wasn't a colonel. In other words, he said he wore different hats and that none of them really meant anything. I had a hard time understanding what he did. I was so totally naive, but he never really talked until he started drinking in the evenings, and he just talked about, he was communicating with me, he was bragging kind of, but I knew that he was real because all the other colonels were just in awe of him or in fear of him. One of them who worked with him when I was at the chamber, warned me. And I thought he was just jealous because he had asked me out, this one particular lieutenant colonel.
Right.
And he just said, "You'll really be sorry." And I had no idea, and he really was trying to
well, that's quite a warning.
Mm-hmm.
And as it turns out, he was absolutely correct.
Yeah, he knew what George had done to his first wife, and he knew how he'd been involved with, at the highest level, with Iran-Contra. And North
and when Kay Griggs says he knew what George did to his first wife, there is ample reason to suspect that foul play was involved.
Oh, well, my family are physicians here in Norfolk, and my grandfather, my uncle, my brother, and I studied a lot of biology and wanted to be a vet myself. And
right.
And I was told by the colonel's wives that and by George, the story was that Suzanne Workman had a heart attack, and she died. And she was young, I mean, relatively young, in her 40s. And
right.
When I found out how she died, and she had a cerebral hemorrhage, and I found that report in a black case that he had hidden up in the attic, and this was after we were married. And when I asked him about it, I was trying to be really light and, sort of, come on, George, tell me how did it happen?
Mm-hmm.
It was just totally bizarre. He didn't call the rescue squad. She supposedly was knocked out at supper time around 5.
Knocked out meaning knocked out how?
Just sort of collapsed, according to him. And
okay, passed out. So this
sounds
like the Terry Schiavo case.
Exactly.
I mean, all right.
Exactly. But then she was very large, and there was not love between them from what I know. He dragged her back to the bedroom. Now, this is a woman who's totally passed out.
Right.
Who's totally, she had a bleeding incident, according to him, when they went down to Florida. That was one of the meetings with the North, Garbani Far, and the whole crowd.
Ollie North and all the rest.
Yeah, he had to go to Miami, and she was getting very upset, because I spoke with I won't say who, because I don't want to get the person, but I spoke with a very high-level person who knew a lot about Sue.
Right.
Actually, 3 people. And she was really upset because he had been involved with all of this, the Iran-Contra, and she knew a lot about what he was doing. So
he used to obviously drink then and
oh yeah, he drank according to him, because I tried to get him to stop drinking when I found out how long he'd been doing this pattern, but for 30 years. And how could someone like that be in charge of international programs that are really delicate and involve national security and people's lives when they can't even paint? He couldn't tell one color from the other. He couldn't even sail a sailboat. I mean, there was just so much he just didn't know how to do. And yet there he was, in charge of international operations and being kind of just sort of making things up. I don't know how to explain it.
You'd think, well, it seems, Kay, to me that a man who has an alcoholism problem, who flaps his gums when he's drunk, would be noted by his superiors, wouldn't you?
Absolutely not.
But he got away with it because he was in such a powerful position. Because he had been not only to the Hun School with the 3 oldest Saudi royals, which is why I believe and how James Baker got involved with my husband, because James Baker was at Princeton earlier and had been in the same eating club. Well, Rumsfeld was in the same secret society and so forth. And I'm not saying they're all
bad, you know. It's just that they were very close.
Did you ever spend time with James Baker, for example?
No, I never did, but my grandmother was from Texas.
I see.
And her grandfather was the attorney for Stephen F. Austin, so I think they probably knew that.
Okay, very good. Stand by, Kay, if you would. Hold on, if you would. We take a break, come right back in just a couple of minutes and continue. Conversation tonight, part 2, with Kay Griggs. So when the drinking began after the marriage and so forth, and this material began to come out, and you're a kid who really didn't understand this. This was a part of the world that, as it is for most humans, completely hidden away. What are you thinking at first? Are you thinking the guy's delusional, or did it all ring true from the beginning? How did it strike you?
Well, I knew he was who he said he was because I very early on met the Marine Corps, the colonels who were at Fleet Marine Force Atlantic, which is, you know, sort of half the world. You know, it's a large operational contingent, which is was with NATO, SACLANT, and the Atlantic Command, and they literally did operations.
When Kay Griggs says operations, she's talking about wet and dry operations, assassinations,
and psychological operations, which my husband, very, very important, and people do not realize that they literally are tormenting and doing all kinds of horrible things to innocent people, sometimes just as experiments.
Give me an example. Now, this locks in to the claims by many people, regular citizens, who say that they've either had a brain implant, or they're hearing voices, or they're obviously involved in some kind of an experiment. They're being monitored, toyed with, tormented, you name it. Any truth to that in your experience?
Well, of course there's truth in that, and the kinds of toys that they have to use on unsuspecting people.
Give me an example, would you please?
For instance, the Germans who came in. My grandfather was a retired reserve Navy captain, a doctor who was in charge of intelligence during World War II. He was sort of put into it because he spoke German, being a physician and an obstetrician, and he was in the port of Norfolk. And my grandmother lived with me the last 12 years of her life and told me all kinds of stories about how he helped with Camp Perry and Fort Hunt, and when they brought the Germans over, the CCC, and I'm not saying Germans are bad, but there were many, many Germans who came over even before the end of World War I.
Right.
They came over earlier.
Right. This paperclip wasn't the only operation.
They were just pouring over. There were something like 20 bases or more in Texas alone, in Virginia, and they were just pouring into the port, and they set up these CCC camps to have these Germans have a place to live. And of course they worked hard, and then they would give them jobs, and so they weren't just the scientists that we know about. They were people in all walks of life, and I've met many of them and many of their children.
Right.
And so, but the psychological operations group came in, I know, through some of the Germans. It was institutionalized a little bit before, during, and after World War II, when just the entire German command were essentially given money and so forth, the SS, by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Army, and they were, in fact, Galen himself was in Virginia for a whole year with his 6 guys, and I mean, lots of people went up to Fort Hunt to see him. So the psychological operations that, games that even the Soviets used, the Russians used, were institutionalized in our American Army and Joint Command. It wasn't just the CIA.
I know, I understand. What a time! What an amazing thing went on here.
It's just wrong.
Right. Oh, what are some of the the devices today? And you were involved with this man until fairly recently, really.
Well, things were done to me, and I was trying to sort of figure out what was going on. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but these kinds of operations were laughingly by some of the guys who just said, "Oh, well, they're just practicing. They just practice on the wives." And I couldn't believe it, because some of the things that were done to me were not only sadistic but cruel. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And the one night the SEALs were caught in my neighborhood. A neighbor's huge dog was out, and my windows in my car were smashed 2 or 3 different times. I had tires flattened. On court days, I had people coming into my house, and putting something like 12 screwdrivers. Well, who in the world would believe a wife who said that she found 12 screwdrivers or batteries in a drawer? So I knew.
See, that it's exactly the kind of thing, Kay, I've heard from other people. There's a victims group who have been played with like this mentally.
Yeah.
They do this to people. They can beam.
And they laugh about it.
Oh, yes. They beam voice to skull technologies, microwave. They can put voices in people's minds. And sometimes apparently they'll leave a channel open, and these people actually hear them laughing about what they're doing to them.
Well, you wouldn't believe it. When Sarah McClendon, the senior White House correspondent, tried to get hold of me after I had called her frantically after I had the 2 death threats. And she said she had to call from another house, because she said every time she called my number, and I was the only one there, a male voice answered and said, "This is Little Creek Military Base, and the Griggses don't live here anymore."
Yeah, I got it. All right.
That was my number.
Yeah, stand by, Kay. I understand fully. We'll pause and come right back. Back with Kay Griggs, Conversation Part 2. All right, Kay, you're with this man. He's drinking. How often did he drink, and how often did he start
George
stealing?
drank, I think, to sort of blot things out.
Was it a pain he was trying to assuage somehow?
Well, he worked, he ran, and he drank hard, and he certainly had a lot of quote-unquote responsibility.
How many people did he kill?
Well, George, I only know about some that he told me he himself killed when he was young, and when they got him drunk, and he was in a group of people at the Hun School, and he had very much the same kind of background as Lee Harvey Oswald. I mean, he was taught to fly an airplane as a favor when he was a boy. He was very poor. And his father was a janitor at the school when he was a smaller boy. But he was the outstanding one in the family, and so they literally sent his family to California, got them out of the way, and then he got a scholarship to go to a fancy, quote-unquote, boys' school in Princeton called the Hun. And
that's H-U-N for your listeners.
H-U-N. And that's where he was molested by a group of teachers. He was put in with the very, very wealthy Saudi royals and Admiral Kimmel's son and others, and yet he was a rising star in that group, and everyone thought he was so handsome. But how he was molested as a boy those 4 years and never saw his parents, and, you know, they really messed with his mind, and then if he was good, he was bribed, essentially. If he was good with these older men, he got a scholarship to Princeton.
When you say, let's not mince words now, when he was bribed and if he was good with these older men, you're talking about sex.
Yeah, of course.
And this was common. This was common.
Yes.
All right.
And you see, the Russell Trust, the money came from England, and it came and I think the Saudi boys were just as innocent in the beginning too. And what they were doing, and I'm not saying I have Jewish friends and this kind of thing. I'm definitely not anti-Jewish, but the people who were in charge of the men, the Lavender boys who were doing these things to my husband, were Brooklyn people, Jewish people. And I don't know why this was going on like that, but the money, which they didn't even own the Russell House. Russell House was bought because there was a man who was part of the UN, and he talked this wealthy banker in London to buy this mansion, and they put the Saudi royals, and they had parties and rompings in this big house, and the poor boys rarely went to classes.
Really?
Yeah, they were totally under the sway of this guy, Charles Cabot.
Sexual?
Yes.
Psychological?
Totally.
And this was run by
Germans.
Okay.
But these were German, good-looking Germans who had that, what William Manchester called the German disease. In other words, they were homosexual Germans like Clay Shaw.
There's an awful lot of homosexual British, too. It's just, it runs in the upper circles.
Absolutely.
No matter what country you look at.
Sure.
The Jews you mentioned, it's interesting. Would these have been, as you look back now, perhaps
Oppenheimer and that they were at this institute.
Okay.
And I believe they also, you remember the man, John Nash, the brilliant physicist?
Yeah, okay, I know.
A beautiful mind. I'm sure they did the same thing to him. I'm sure they raped him. Because
Seems to be, it's control, isn't it? As much as anything.
It is. It's a way of, they know these people are outstanding, they're rising stars, they have potential.
And they want to get
they want to be able to control them at all times using fear tactics and
Same thing with Skull and Bones, correct?
Pardon?
Same thing with Skull and Bones.
Well, of course. I mean, they're telling their sexual secrets in college. But a lot of these boys in Skull and Bones, I believe they get to them just the way they did my husband when they're in high school. Because then they're really, they're scholarship boys.
Right.
And they depend on that college education.
Fast tracking them right in.
Very fast track.
Okay, but as far as the murders and so forth, you think that George was directly involved in some? Now we say, oh sure, give me an example or two. You don't have to name names.
For example, he told me that he talked about airplane crashes being one of the ways that they. In other words, he was saying airplane crashes are really a good thing.
They still are. They use them all the time.
Yeah, and I said, well, explain to me. First of all, he had to explain what he believed, because I'm a very strong Christian.
Right.
And, murder is not good. And he, with a straight face, I'm really believing him and wanting to understand him. He said, well, it's not murder. And I said, well, why
it's not murder.
Not murder. I said, well, why isn't it murder? He said, because there's no emotion involved. And of course, I never argued with him because I really sincerely wanted to understand.
So the killers they're psychopathic. They have no emotional attachment one way or the other to the act of killing. So it's not murder.
Exactly.
It's just like stepping on a bug or something.
Exactly. And the way he said orders and the order, we were ordered. And it was as if his life depended. He would follow an order. He would get, before he would leave and disappear, he would be sort of curled up in a fetal position for a couple of days. I'm sure he had a chip in him.
Right.
And he would go out and, sort of disappear and go up to meet Michael O'Boyle, and there was a little kind of a brick thing which I'm sure they put the messages in at the end of our acre, which I found, which, had a little kind of cubby hole.
Assignments, whatever.
Yeah, and he would go up one night he went up 3 times to the grocery store, and Michael O'Boyle, I found out, the one who'd always been the co-partner of his, even from Vietnam, lived here in Virginia Beach, his very best friend for 2 years. And I only met him at his retirement. And there he was, only a few miles away.
Interesting. All right, stand by, Kay, if you would.
Sure.
Come right back and continue our conversation with Kay Griggs in just a minute. Okay, welcome back. And talking with Kay Griggs. Kay, how high up did this chain go? Was this cabal that your husband was a part of? We certainly heard the names of presidents. Bush 41. Did it go back to Reagan? Certainly Iran-Contra did. But name some names of some of the top people who were talked about by your ex-husband.
Well, I hesitate to sort of go really high.
But you could if you wanted to.
Yeah, because
right. That's fine. You don't want to get into. You're in enough trouble. I understand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to help from within by retiring some of these guys and their methods, and the sailors, the Marines know what a cherry Marine is. They know what they do in the crossing the line ceremonies and the dining ins. They know about the Crisco and the anuses, all these horrible things that are just the ritual
now,
on
board. All right, how common is this? Seriously.
Well, of course, everyone does it. I mean, if you are on a Navy ship, the guys strip down and they have Crisco. They have guys in a line, Crisco in the anuses, and they have, the guy who dresses up like women and the royal baby, and the wogs are made to suck olives out of the belly of the royal baby, a man who's nude. I mean, the tail, if you're in the Navy or you're in the Marines, it's a joke if you say you don't know anything about it. It's just the wives.
Now, there may be some Marines who don't.
Possibly, but if they're on a ship and they're crossing the equator, or they're in Okinawa, the Cherry Marines, there are books about them.
You say Cherry Marines, meaning Virgin Marines?
They're the bottoms. The Cherry Marines are the bottoms.
Okay, I got you.
And
now you're describing rituals and behavior that almost go back to ancient Greek warriors.
Well, this is what they tell the men, so that they sort of hook them in and say, well, this is what we've been doing, and it's okay. And I'm certainly not a prude, but the problem is it's institutionalized, and my father was in the Navy. My brother, my uncles, I lost two uncles in World War II, and coming from a family of gynecologists and obstetricians, I'm certainly not a prude.
Right.
But I really think that when you have generals who are doing these kinds of things, and captains, and it just really makes somebody like some of the people I've interviewed, like Bob, it messes up their minds and their lives.
Oh, how could it not?
Yeah. I mean, he told me about the incident with Kissinger, which I told about in Pastor Strawcutter's tape. And
Please,
Bob,
please repeat that.
Well,
we have about 8-9 minutes.
Yeah, Bob.
Now, who is Bob? Who is Bob again?
Bob is.
Don't need the last name.
No, I wouldn't dare. He was a tall, sort of middle-aged, had been enlisted in the Army during Vietnam, and must have been very good-looking. He had a wife and 3 children. He was doing things for a little newspaper. He was writing articles for a little newspaper before he was pressed into going into Vietnam.
All right.
And being good-looking, and his family were German, but that wasn't the issue. He just was good-looking. And he was in, I believe he said Cambodia, or, in other words, he was where they weren't supposed to be. And Kissinger, they had a base camp there, and Kissinger was in the base camp. He had a big tent there. And Bob told me how Kissinger came over to him. They were out, sort of inspecting the troops during the day, and Kissinger got Bob off to the side and put his hands in a certain place and invited him to come to his tent. Well, that evening? And he said there were 2 other people there, and he described to me graphically what they did. And I can tell you, and Bob broke down and cried. He said, what are you going to do when someone like this, as powerful as he is, does this to you, and you try to go home after having been in a really crazy war anyway? And Bob was warned by him not to talk, and in fact, when he got back to Washington State or Oregon or wherever it was, there was a psychiatrist who was there, and they tried to put him in an institutionalized setting, and he had some friends back home, back in Virginia, and he got back home, and he just he said it really messed up his marriage.
He told this story to you.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about, I assume, sexual penetration.
Yeah. Oh, yes, and just anal, just horrible stuff.
Right.
And it just is so.
And you had no doubt
sad.
no doubt that he was telling the truth.
Oh, absolutely, no doubt whatsoever. Okay. No doubt whatsoever. And because he didn't have, he was just we had been friends, and he was just talking. We were just talking, and he brought it up, and it wasn't something I was wanting to know about in particular.
Well, he had to talk, obviously, and there was something about you that seems to have made him want to open up.
Yeah, because I was trying to find out how things were in Vietnam, and and I had a couple of Marine Corps colonels tell me about how it was, and
similar thing. You mean how it was, meaning similar things?
Yeah, because there were no women there, and if there were women, in other words, this is wartime, and I understand that.
It is said that this is not uncommon in the military. There are many stories from occupied Palestine of Israeli troops being observed doing similar things. I can't vouch for that, but we do get stories. And is it propaganda? I don't know, but this kind of thing is not strictly. I don't think it's
no,
only
it's not limited.
Service.
Oh no, it's a wartime thing. I think that
now,
happens.
Well, George Bush has made several interesting statements. I believe it was the Canadian spokesman for the Prime Minister, and he said something like, "Your spokesman is prettier than mine," meaning Scott McClellan, and he was talking about the other young man. And he said two or three things to the guy which were kind of over the line.
You mean Bush?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is suggestive of a bisexual American president who's looking at other men and not keeping his mouth shut.
Sure. And the bicycle rides and things, sort of, I'm not saying that he does, but I'm saying that here they were talking about Clinton and Monica.
Right.
And don't tell me that Scott McClellan and the Bush's number one guy did not know that Marine Gannon was coming in at 9 o'clock in the morning and leaving at 5 in the afternoon. And I lived with Sarah McClendon, who is the senior White House correspondent, and we went into the White House briefings during the Clinton administration. And I know how the correspondents behaved. They would go in, they would have the daily briefing, and everyone would show up at a certain time. And this Gannon, the schedule has come out, he was in there doing things other than, and he certainly was not a correspondent. So who was he servicing? And don't tell me that Rove wasn't totally aware of everything. Because this is how they hold people and keep their secrets.
So, in your opinion, George Bush is clearly bisexual.
Well, I don't know whether it's George Bush or Rove or McClellan, but
somebody at the higher level.
Certainly one of those three is.
And they all have to know it, right?
And probably a few more. Because
you're saying is that they all have to know it.
Of course they know it. Someone who's told his sexual history when he's in college and thinks it's cool, and to talk about that, certainly he's going to talk about it with...
Any truth to the rumors of Bush and the former mayor of a large city in Tennessee?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't want to talk about that. I know that I know a lot of things about some of the Republican operatives. And I know quite a lot. I don't know whether I'm ready to talk about that.
Let me put it this way. Would it surprise you?
No, of course not.
Okay. All right. Good.
Murders are what I'm really aware of.
I was going to say we have much to talk about that's far more serious than sexual preference.
Yeah.
And we'll do that after the top of the hour break. The murders.
The murders of people like Paisley and Shadron and Siegler and Mary Meyer and Ron Brown.
Mary Meyer killed with 3 or 4 others in that restaurant. That was not Mary Meyer.
Mary Meyer was married to the number 2 guy in the CIA who was a Marine.
Got it.
Cord Meyer.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Lots of murders, including the Wellstones. Senator Mel Carnahan. Murder is and has been a commonly used tool in American politics for forever.
Yeah.
Nothing new. More high-tech, tougher to trace now. Airplanes being a preferred mode of doing this.
Yeah, it really is. Airplanes and cars.
Dr. David Kelly, of course, in England, absurd to say he committed suicide. Vince Foster, of course, is as far from a suicide as you're going to get. We'll talk with Kay Griggs more about these things as we begin our second hour in just a minute. Okay, we're back on number 2 with Kay Griggs. Murder as a weapon. Murder is a common political tool. Murder done with utter remorselessness, no conscience at all. Murder done as simple
strategic.
as swatting a fly in a strategic move.
It's strategic.
It's a chess game, and you take out players. It's a strategic move.
Yeah, and it avoids, if there's a critical mass that is building, which is opposing the prevailing policy or plans. George was involved with, of course, plans and policy, which is one of the many hoops that one has to jump through. And the group, Armitage and Gates, McFarland and Buck Revell, and they coordinate. It was a coordinating sub.
Talking about former CIA Director Bill Gates.
Yeah. It was in the White House, and it was a coordinating subgroup in the White House that George worked with, and they had been all, as Rummy, at SHAPE, or Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe in Mons, Belgium, or they had been to the Defense College at Rome for 6 months. And in other words, they felt as if they were special because they had been given special assignments, which their brothers had sort of suggested that they do, and they had been given these jobs. And Bob Oakley, who was an ambassador, he was a special assistant to Reagan, and it was a small buddy group that had coalesced during Vietnam. I mean, Armitage he was a Navy SEAL, and he and George are very close.
George?
My husband. Mm-hmm. And you see, the State Department, these operations were done through the Department of State, because they'd wear plain clothes, they'd have passports with different names on them. Compartmentalized
or ordered from the top?
Well, it depended on how far you were up. You knew who your buddy was. George had Michael O'Boyle, and they were very close. And
when you say very close, and you laugh,
yeah, well,
you're talking about very close.
Yeah, I know. Right. Yeah.
Right.
So, but the fact that George and Michael O'Boyle were that close, everybody knew about my husband and another couple that, and there was an incident, there were quite a number of incidents that one of the Marine colonels told me about, and everybody knew.
What do you mean another couple? A threesome?
Threesome and foursome. Yeah, Rush River Lodge and the Earls. And
wife swapping, men swapping?
Yes.
Whatever.
Yes, of course. Wife swapping, and for instance, one of the couples in Indonesia, when he was there with Wolfowitz, and George was training assassins there, and with this Air Force quote-unquote couple, And the secretary was involved with the husband and the wife. They were all doing that together. And this particular tour, Sue was back at home.
That's his first wife.
Yeah.
Okay. Just trying to keep
I don't think she was happy about any of this, to be quite honest.
And she had to know about much of it, I'm sure.
Oh, sure. I think that
Did George brag about it when he'd get drunk? Was this something he...
Yeah, he talked about it. He talked about Mary Halab, and her husband was the assistant to Malcolm Kerr, who was the head of the American University of Beirut, and he was, single while he was in Beirut and having sexual sort of forays, and the husband of Mary Halab was a Lebanese Muslim, and the minute Malcolm Kerr was murdered, Mary Halab's husband he was an administrator, but he became the head of the American University of Beirut. And in other words, they would pop off somebody who was British in a heartbeat. And the people who work with these Marines are Israelis. They're at Metcal. They're assassins. And they train at Quantico. And they have a special friend, and I know one, and I'm not going to mention any names, who's a Marine, an African-American Marine, but I know that he's not straight. He's a Cherry Marine, and the guy who, during this time frame when I knew him, tried to get him a date, but he had a male friend who was an Israeli. The duo, when they had the two guys together.
So this is a hit team you're talking about.
Exactly. Absolutely. Okay. And the guy who's Israeli would do hits inside the United States and vice versa. And they would just take a flight, and they'd, just as the SEAL teams do, and go over there and dress up as if they're Arabs or Palestinians, and blame it on the Palestinians in order to create
well, it's not only false flag operations, but operations that go far beyond that. So when you see the bombings and the killings and so forth, even of American soldiers in Iraq, the stories that suggest that there may be Israelis involved with killing American soldiers.
There always are Israelis involved, and that's, if you even look at Abu Ghraib, and that's the thing, when I was living with Sarah McClendon, because I have a roommate who was Jewish. I mean, I'm not
No, prejudice. I know. We understand that. It's okay.
But the thing was, I went into the Department of State. This was during Clinton's administration, because I wanted to see the Near East section. I really wanted peace in that area. And I was going with a group of school kids who were going through the Department of State and having a show of everything. And I went up to the floor where the Near East section, they call it, was and is. They had about 8 doors with these little punch code things, and all the doors were open. And I went into every single door, and there was not one Christian, there was not one Roman Catholic, there was not one Muslim, not one Arab. They were all Zionists, or men with yarmulkes, and they had, and I said to
everyone,
every single one, not one exception. And I had seen Dennis Ross and some of these guys who are, are dual nationals, who are what we call neocons, because they are really more pro-Israeli than they are pro-American.
They're Israeli firsters, yeah.
Yes, and I don't think we can't, as a country, be looked upon as an honest broker if we don't have anybody who speaks the language or who gives a darn about
this is a coup d'etat has occurred by another nation, and certainly a geopolitical philosophy.
Absolutely.
We know as Zionism, sometimes called neocon, whatever you want to call it. The predominant membership, of course, happens to be Jewish. There are Christian Zionists, but this is a Jewish supremacist Zionist group.
Yes. And if you get a magazine like the Journal of Net-Centric Warfare, C4, ISR, a journal put out by Defense News Media Group, and you look in there, you see ISI, the Israeli company. I would go to Army shows and see the Hunter system, which was a command and control system, which was Israeli run with our equipment.
Yep.
They know when we're having all of our operations. They know everything because they're meeting every day in Quantico up there with the FBI, with the CIA, and it's just not fair because if they want to cause trouble, which I believe that they naturally do, I mean, look at the Liberty. I have one of my best friends'
USS
brother,
Liberty she's talking about, yeah.
the Liberty. But, I mean, they won't.
That's just one example.
Yeah,
There's suggestion that the 241 Marines that were killed in Beirut in the bombing were taken out by Israelis as well.
Yeah, because Sharon was involved with that, and my husband said he knew about it beforehand. And there he was, a Marine, knowing about it, and he could do nothing.
Well, as you know, Israeli companies have the contracts to do the billing for about 80% or so of American telephone and cell phone communications. They've also put in the highest level, ultra top secret communications systems and software between the White House and the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And don't tell me they haven't built backdoors in there. They have the ability to monitor telephone calls real time all the way to Israel and listen in anywhere they want at any time. These people are absolutely brilliant at what they've done, and they have totally taken over much of the internal mechanism of this country at the upper level.
Absolutely. And the top computer guy at the Pentagon, I know, and he is a rabid Zionist and calls himself an anarchist. And what's somebody like that doing in charge of all the
Well, and we have, of course, Zackheim during his tenure at the Pentagon when $1 trillion went missing.
Yeah.
All right, stand by. We'll break and come right back with Kay Griggs. Right back with you. I'm Jeff Rense, coast to coast on the Genesis Communications Network and worldwide on the Internet as well. Rense.com is the website, RENSE.com. This is the kind of material we bring you at Rense.com around the clock from around the globe. And we're very much honored to have Kay Griggs back tonight. She is more than a courageous American patriot. She's a truly incredible human being to take this kind of a risk to try to make a difference, which is what we all need to do. The numbers of murders, Kay, let's just take the Clinton years, the so-called famous, infamous Clinton death list, which went on and on and on. More recently, we have, of course, the death of Dr. David Kelly. Did you hear anything about that from your sources?
From some of my British friends. In fact, I had witnessed him on C-SPAN the day before he was murdered, and I saw him squirming. I do sketches of people, pencil sketches and so forth, in just a few minutes, just to try and improve my, observing people and body language. And he was so nervous. And Jack Straw, I believe that the individuals around him had him murdered because he was put on the hot seat, and he had to talk, and he did. And the very next day, he was on C-SPAN, and then the very next day we heard about him, and I believe he was murdered. Oh, no. And the interesting thing too, when I had the 2 death threats, and there was a royal Mountie who was with this New Jersey guy named Joe who came to Mahi Maz, and in other words, he just said, he'd done his wife, and that if I didn't stop talking about my conversation with William Colby, who was a friend of my Uncle Ben's, because William Colby had gone to Princeton with my Uncle Ben, and they had both been in cap and gown, and that's one of the reasons that I sort of thought George would be all right, because my father's sister's husband, Uncle Ben Delaney, had been a football star and been in cap and gown and had the same thing. But his parents were killed, and he went to the Hun school, and he went through the same hoops that my husband did. Mm-hmm. And I called William Colby after I had the death threat at Mahi Maz, and he said, "Don't worry." He knew who my family were. He knew who Uncle Ben was, and mm-hmm. George. And he said, "This is awful, and just don't worry." And I didn't worry after I talked to him, because I just knew that he was going to take care of things. And about 2 weeks later, I open up the front page of the Virginian Pilot and find out that William Colby had gone out in a canoe, and he disappeared, and it was exactly the same thing that had happened to Paisley. There's a wonderful book called Widows by Corson and Trento about 3 murdered high-level men, and Paisley had a similar job as O'Neill and the fellow in England, and he was murdered the same way William Colby was.
Talking about John O'Neill.
Yes, John O'Neill.
Who was in the World Trade Center.
I'm talking about William Colby was murdered in the water in a boat, and so was Paisley. Only Paisley was a little bit earlier, during the Nixon administration. But this is what they do when the eyes are on, the public's eyes are on people, and this is why they're very fearful. Why I'm sure people like George and Oswald they tense up. They just get, you look at them and their hands are clenched, and they're frightened because they know what they do to people, and so they realize that if they come out in the open,
they're out too.
Somebody may do them.
Yeah. Gunter Rusbacher.
I spoke to him.
Yeah. Gunter was another operative.
Mm-hmm. But he didn't go to Princeton. Oswald didn't go to Princeton. What I know is that once you've been through the elite ROTC and intelligence groups at cap and gown at Princeton, and you have those friendships, then they protect each other. Whereas an Oswald or a Gunter Rossbacher, who's part of the Galen group, they usually leave. They go somewhere if they're lucky, or they do them.
Galen meaning Gehlen, the former German World War II intelligence chief.
Yeah, but they did everything. I mean, I believe they're still involved with the 911.
When you saw, and we touched upon this briefly last time, you knew that, I assume maybe you knew, maybe after the fact, that Dick Cheney had literally issued the most blatant threat against a U.S. senator that probably has ever been in print, when he threatened Wellstone about a month before the Wellstones were murdered.
Yeah, I know they were murdered, and the guy who took over, he was born in New Jersey.
Coleman. Yeah, he's actually
Coleman.
He's a Zionist and doing the bidding of his masters.
And interestingly enough, Coleman and our mayor had a special secret trip to Israel together. And this is the largest military complex in the world, and there's a lot of collusion I know about with the Meyer Lansky Rabbi Kahane group that these people are involved with here in Norfolk, and that's not good. Because they're really dual nationals. They're not patriotic Americans.
Well, look how many criminals have fled to Israel for security.
Look at Jonathan Pollard, for example.
Well, they can't quite get him out, but they're still working on it.
Yeah.
All right, stand by, Kay, if you will. We'll come right back and continue our conversation with Kay Griggs. pretty unbelievable things that she saw and heard about firsthand from her ex-husband. We know the story by now. Kay, here's an eclectic topic for a moment, if I might. Did you ever run across in all your years any comments from your ex-husband about the UFO issue, ETs and so forth, about the cover-up that's going on?
No, the only thing I can think of that I learned about and visited actually were the underground bunkers.
Where were they?
Well, I went in one in Norway that was a secret base.
Who owned it?
Pardon?
Whose base?
Well, it was, you see, we have the Joint Command, the NATO EUCOM shaped crowd, have lots of bases where they are storing prepositioned material.
Material meaning?
Well, weapons and this kind of thing, which they're selling through Israeli channels and some of the black market individuals.
Talking about small nuclear warheads as well?
Yes, and drugs. And I met, I'm not going to mention, of course, who, but I met the person who was in charge of the drug lord in Norway, and he and George, I guess they thought I was really naive, or, but I heard the conversation. And
what was it like?
Well, this fellow was running Norwegian drug operations out of prison under the nose of this friend who'd been with my husband at the NATO Defense College in Rome.
Cocaine, heroin, what?
Yes. And I know for a fact that another Marine colonel, retired, was involved with doing that, channeling it through Mexico, Lake Chapala.
No problem getting drugs into this country.
No,
Everybody
and
knows
these
that.
are retired colonels who were close friends of the chief of staff of the commandant of the Marine Corps. And another man was murdered, colonel, and I was involved with helping his brother, Dr. Sabo, to get this brought to light, because Colonel Sabo was murdered. His wife, his doctor brother, and everyone down there knew that he did not commit suicide. And if you look on the internet under SABOW, you'll find David Hoffman's book on the internet about that.
We covered that in the past.
Did you?
Yep.
And
okay,
Ron Ray is aware of it. He's another colonel who's aware of the homosexual involvement with
underground bunkers. Secret underground. How big?
Well, one of the people I was with, who NATO, German, of course, New Jersey, in the Air Force, they build these bunkers. It's Red Horse. They're called the Red Horses. And, the red symbolizes the elite group. And then there's purple, which my husband used a purple pen, so he was higher up than the red one. And I was told about the bunkers that the Red Horse Germans in the United States build, Air Force, and they're, 6 floors down. They're all over the place. And, of course, we know about Mount Weather and that kind of place.
So these are used as transshipment points for not only weapons, but drugs.
In Germany and in Norway and in England and in other countries. So they store these weapons and so forth, and they're shipped from here in Newport News. They have these ships, which the military guys change hats. They look like civilian ships, but they're loaded right there. The Army, the guy who was made to retire in just recently, the operation that's going on right now.
Just
at
last
Fort Monroe.
week.
Well, he would have been in charge of these huge shipments going over to be stored in Norway, Stavanger, in that area. In fact, my husband was very involved with setting that up.
Kay, it sounds like it's rotten from the top down.
Well, I think there are good people.
But overall,
and I really believe there are people working on the inside, like Colin Powell. Now, I don't know what you think, but I really feel that people like General Zinni and Colin Powell.
Right.
And,
No, they're Americans.
yes, and they're real Americans.
Yep.
And they know what these people are doing.
They did as much. Colin Powell did as much as he could do. Then he had to step out.
A really wonderful man.
Yeah, working against impossible.
And there are Marines too who are good, whom I know, who know what's going on and work within the system, like Zinni, speaking out, high level.
Well, these are great Americans. They're still there.
And Scott Ritter was a Marine. Who
Scott's work has been on all over the internet, and another
just
truly
wonderful
amazing.
work.
They tried to trash him too.
Oh, they do. This is they have paid operatives who are trying to, say I'm making this up or whatever. But I have the pictures. I have the diary, and Pastor Strawcutter has copies of them on his video.
Going back to Ron Brown, another crook. Took a wrong step, and they removed him. But they removed a lot of other people as well. You're familiar with the story about Shelley Kelly, the stewardess? True story?
Yeah, I heard that from Sarah, and Sarah heard it from. She was in contact with high-level generals, Sarah McClendon, senior White House correspondent, and I was there when that happened, and when the naval chief was murdered. Borda, and there were quite a number of murders. It was an Air Force chief of staff who just was going in, and his plane went down. There was Clinton's birthday plane that went down on his birthday night. He was supposed to be on it.
So Clinton was supposed to be exited.
Yeah, Clinton. You see, Sarah believed that the guy who had the office across from Foster, Nussbaum, was involved with
Foster's murder? Yeah,
because always you find there is an assassin, a former assassin turned lawyer, who's given Harvard Law School or whatever, who has an office directly across from the good victim. Guy, the innocent.
The victim.
Yeah, the victim.
Amazing. Back in a minute, talk about Ron Brown and the fact that they would never allow his autopsy pictures, x-rays of his head to be shown, and much more with Kay Griggs after this. Back with Kay Griggs. Ron Brown's murder. We know the story about the woman, one of the medical examiners, Air Force. I think she was Air Force anyway, or Navy. Tried to make the X-rays available. There was a hole in the top of his head, about the size of a 45 caliber slug. They say they have weapons that can shoot frozen pieces of very cold ice.
Oh, I had a copy which was taken out of my house of a book of just listing page after page of what they called non-lethal, which were very lethal, by the way, weapons. And it was put out, written, compiled by a doctor who was in San Diego area for this Air Force group in Colorado Springs. And you cannot believe the hideous, cruel they had ice. They had, the ice bullets, and it was just, I couldn't believe it. It was just like the brochure I saw with the Twin Towers and Bin Laden's face a year before 9/11, which was put out by the OPSEC group. They had, literally, before 9/11, they had a glossy-colored book showing it off at the Naval Institute with the Twin Towers on the front and Bin Laden superimposed a year before the 9/11. And these people, just citizens like me, just would not believe how sick some of these psychological operations that they use, the chemicals, the biologicals that they use on people, on human beings, and sometimes without their knowledge, prisoners and soldiers and who just have no idea that they're being used as guinea pigs.
Not a clue.
Not a clue.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have believed it either if I hadn't married the man I married.
When you talked about this to Sarah McClendon, she probably was not surprised by too much of it.
Oh, no. In fact, Sarah told me, she said, she tried to get hold of me, which I think I mentioned to you, and was blocked. My phone was being blocked. And there, I could tell you some stories about that, and you would not believe it. She had to go to Maryland, and she called me, because she told me she was going to call me back in a couple of days. She was working on a book. They were writing a book about her, another book about her. And she had to go to Maryland and call me, and she said, Mrs. Griggs, I want you to come up here right away and talk to my study group in the press club. And so I went up, and, she had to kind of hit me in the side to get me to talk, because there were all these, we asked where they were from, and there were people from FBI, CIA, military intelligence, NSA, who were sitting around this table just looking at me. Mm-hmm. And after having had death threats and windows smashed, and knowing that my husband's lawyer was Barry Cantor, who was an Air Force colonel, dirty trickster, bragged about it in Masonic Temple number 1, and the three judges were also, I found out, in Masonic Temple number 1 in Norfolk, and they happen to have all been Jewish, and I don't know, I'm not, but I just thought, well, this is really not fair when you've got military people who are in the same Masonic lodge as judges, and my husband's lawyer. It's no wonder that my couple of lawyers just said, well, no, I don't think I can handle this case. Because, they were caught in my neighborhood, the Navy SEALs were. Going in with my suitcase in the woods, a judge who lives across the street found an open suitcase of mine that was in my car, and they'd taken it out and strewn, things were all over his woods. It was just, it's horrible. And I'm not the only wife. This is the norm. If the wife is trouble, sometimes they do the guy in. And I've talked to some wives whose husbands were murdered right in their own home.
Is this among this
here
group?
In Norfolk.
Among this group, and you mentioned that Norfolk is quite. Is it? I guess there has to be a certain amount of fear-based underlying current to all of this, because the stakes are very high, and human life obviously means next to nothing to these people.
No, not anything.
Tell us more about Norfolk, which is, of course, one of the Navy's vital organs, as it were.
Well, my whole family have been reserve naval officers, but civilians, business people, doctors,
yes,
and attorneys and so forth. And I, when I was a girl, made my debut, and went to all the MIDI dances, had my picture shaking hands with Admiral McCain, with John McCain's father.
Right.
And the Navy, to me, is just a wonderful organization. Lots of my friends were Navy brats and so forth. But I never, we have in Norfolk the largest military complex in the world. And I don't know why they've done this, why they've concentrated. The Air Force, NASA, Langley is here. We've got the whole operation Army base at Fort Monroe and Fort Story. They have these commands little commands that are on big bases. I mean, you think that Little Creek is just a naval base, amphibious base,
mm-hmm.
but it has, there are sub-commands on these bases which are joint. And the same thing, Dam Neck, they have the group that goes abroad and kills people, the SEAL Team 6, which is called Red Cell. The Red Horse is another bunker builder group that's international. The red just means that they go abroad and they are involved with killing and so forth. Purple is the level that my husband was on, signing his name in purple, and he showed me his purple pen, and, he had a desk just like Rummy's, a stand-tall desk, and, he was trying to emulate Rummy and sort of, but, no, Norfolk is a really key place. We have aircraft carriers and, the master jet bases here.
Sounds like one of the greatest targets in history.
Well, yeah, and why would they concentrate all of this? We've also got an oil refinery, and, all these, it's just not a very safe place to be now.
Doesn't sound like it.
No.
Let's talk more about Clinton and Monica Lewinsky.
Well, in the diary, George, there's sort of a triumvirate. General Joy and General Carl Steiner, who was Army. These were special ops people who mm-hmm. did dirty tricks, and they were involved in the Waco.
Dirty tricks meaning deadly dirty tricks.
Yeah. And Steiner and Joy were involved with what happened with Noriega, because they're booming boom boxes and poisoning. It's just the whole rainbow of things that they can do to people to make them part of the PSYOP, tricks. And so anyway, the Clinton administration, Monica, I believe, was planted there by Carl Steiner. Linda Tripp worked for Carl Steiner, and Linda Tripp was under Nussbaum. And Linda Tripp was an operative. Her husband was an operative. She worked for Steiner down at the JFK little assassin school there at Fort Bragg. It's, the elite group that was involved with naturally training the Rangers and the parade boys, the French, the guys with the red. I don't know. They have all these colors and they're always switching things around. But she was an operative and had been, like so many of them, like North, caught with their hand in the till when they were a teenager, and then told, well, we're going to protect you and not tell on you, but make you famous. In other words, that was the thing that got them into the criminal world within the military. And Linda Tripp was a handler for Monica. And
Monica knew it, right?
Of course, Monica had that psychological profile where she was raised in the culture in which she was raised. It's okay to have sex, for girls to have sex.
But she was a dual citizen as well, dual loyalist.
Yeah,
anyway.
dual. Yeah, she was a Zionist, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they, if you've ever read and talked to those folks, they think it's, even in their scriptural writings, it's okay to have sex with children. It's not considered bad. but she had, and she has no guilt about it. And so naturally, when you put a girl who's young, who's already had a history of this kind of behavior in with the president, they knew what was going to happen.
All right. Hold on, we'll pause and come right back with Kay Griggs. There are a lot of books out there, by the way, which underwrite, substantiate, validate all the things she's saying, and we'll talk about some of those as well. For those of you who are honestly skeptical and would like more proof, we'll offer some choices for you to pursue and other things as well. So hang on, we'll be right back with more after the top of the hour break. All right, welcome back. Talking with Kay Griggs, hour number 3 coming up, our second conversation. Our first one on August the 3rd is in the archives for you to check out. I've also moved Greg Szymanski's article back up to the first news block. It's up there right now. You can see it as the title sticks right out, The Evil Lurking Within. Please do read it. It'll summarize some of what we talked about tonight and talk about much more as well. The major players, the big names, all from her former husband's arrogant, inebriated ramblings, as she has been describing. There are so many of them. This went on for how many years, Kay?
Well, until he would leave and come back. He couldn't stop drinking, but I tried really, really hard to get him to stop drinking.
Right.
He went to counselors and the VA, and I just think it was.
Did he ever get to the point where he said, Kay, I've talked too much. Don't repeat this. Did he warn you about that? He must have.
Yeah, well, he did one time, but when he was drinking, there were a number of incidents that were akin to that, where he would just put a pistol to my head and tell me to, not think about that or talk about that anymore, and that's when I started biting my fingernails, because I knew he had this big rifle, but I didn't know that he had this pistol, and he would get into these, he'd run around the house with no clothes on, he'd run outside and yell and scream. I mean, he wasn't, I'm sure that they knew, how he was. And I could not get anybody to help me. And this was after wife number 1 was dead. And that's not right.
Now you suffered a lot of physical abuse too.
He broke my leg. He socked me in the chest, and I still have just these veins that are pop. He tried to kill me quite a number of times, but he was deranged when he was like that. He'd wake up in the middle of the night and just kick me out of bed. And of course, this is post-traumatic stress, and I didn't know anything about it.
Right.
But I tried to get some help for him and for me, really hard.
Yeah.
But the problem was that that gun was a special registered gun. And I did a bad thing. I just, one day I found it and I took it and threw it in the river. And boy, he warned me then. You know, I mean, I was talked to a number of times when I was down there at the Marine Corps base, and I took the pictures in the Officers Club that night. That was a really bad thing for me to do. He chased me down the dock, and I, you know, jumped in the water and held on to the piers. I was raised with brothers on a farm, and I'm telling you,
you're not a wimp,
tough.
is what you're saying.
I mean, I'm a country girl, but I've never fought back. I mean, I don't believe in that. I believe in talking and communicating and trying to get help coming from a medical family. So they knew how he was, and he's married again, and I'm really frightened for her. But hopefully, you know, they got him on some pills or something.
How do you view the Bush presidency? I mean, the whole process, his original nomination and everything. Now, 2 presidential elections stolen, basically.
It's a farce. It's really sad to me because you know he's not right. You can just look at him. He sort of reminds me of Alfred E. Newman.
Yeah.
I mean, I like his mother, and George introduced George Bush Sr. to Parker Host, and George is very close. My husband is very close to George Bush and James Baker. James Baker's a Marine, and he was in cap and gown, so, you know, but, I mean, I think he's just being run by these Zionists, and they could care less about America. I think it's part of their plan.
Using this as a cash cow.
Absolutely.
And they're just, it's a parasitic relationship.
They're Trotskyites, and they are, wanting to destroy America from within.
Well, they're doing a good job. Did you ever talk to your husband about the obvious intentional opening of America's borders to Latin America and the flood tide of 20 to 25 million illegal aliens and what they're doing to what's left of our economy? Did you ever talk to him about that?
Yeah, you see, it's all part of the word shape. You know, think about the word shape. Shaping the New World Order.
Right.
This group that is now has totally stolen our military, our banks, and they're trying to destroy our culture from within. This is what they plan to do. What the Galen group and the Germans and the Russian, Soviet, the group that came in was let in by the thousands after World War II was institutionalized. So, everybody knows what, the red cell does and who controls the Marine Corps, 4th Marine. We Semper Fidelis is the Rothschild coat of arms, and Roth means red shield. And the money that,
So no problem for American troops to fire on Americans if necessary in the streets here.
In my view, because these people they've been bringing in, unbeknownst to most American citizens, I've known about it ever since I was married to George. They bring in by the thousands through the Department of State young boys who might be 18 years old through the military attachés, the embassies. They pick out rising stars, a diplomat's son, and they turn them. They bring them to the United States. They give them $850 a month. They do criminal activity or murders and assassinations. And in 4 years, guess what? They become a citizen. So they're literally bribed to become an American citizen, or their sister in India is having a wedding, and they just struggle. And it's just been going on for so long. And they train at Quantico. It's no secret that they do all of this joint training with Germans, Israelis, Indians, Koreans, Indonesians, Iranians. They brought over thousands of Iranians. Schwarzkopf's dad introduced the Masonic, quote-unquote, religion to Iran in the 20s to brainwash them. And then in the 60s, they just poured into schools like VMI and the Citadel and West Point and Annapolis. Just, 30, 40 in a year. And then they go back and they're, all their secrets are known and they can be used by the CIA or whatever to, the Israelis to, they can make somebody poor like Oswald, go from job to job, or even like my husband. I mean, he had to go when he was ordered. And they still feel as though they're poor, and so they'll do anything. It's a love-hate kind of thing. They use fear tactics and they use money.
What do you see happening? There's all this chatter and noise on the internet about another 9/11. I'm so tired of seeing people predict there's going to be a nuclear attack on American City.
I know. That to me, if there is, we know it's done out of Fort Monroe, but I don't know. I mean, I think that it's like so many things. If people are aware of this general, I mean, he, bless his heart, because he is a sacrificial lamb of
it seems like
that guy that, Hadley and the general, that German general, what's his name, who was the chief of staff of the army, who really is strange. And, Miller, that Jeffrey Miller down there.
Oh, yeah. So many stories, so many people, and you've just pulled so many things out of the darkness tonight for us to take another look at.
Well, truth is light, and light is truth, and God is in charge, and it only takes one or two people. Look at what Christ did.
Oh, it's true. You're making your contribution, my friend. Stand by.
Well, I love this country.
Yeah.
And I love Virginia.
A lot of us do. So hold on. We'll be right back. Okay, for those who may be doubting any of this and she's just a bitter ex-wife, she's out for publicity. You know how people are when they're not honest skeptics or questioners. What other books would you recommend? What books in general would you recommend?
Well, I'm resources? A former school teacher and history major, and I think that for people who don't, it depends on what they want to know about. There are people like David Wise, who knows about the inside of the intelligence community, who's written any number of books, fiction and nonfiction, like The Spy Who Got Away and Spectrum. Norman Mailer, Harlot's Ghost, is just a general kind of fiction book, but he was definitely in the intelligence CIA assassin kind of world, and you can read any of those books. For people who want to know about our assassination of men, there's just lots of nonfiction books, like Widows, Four American Spies, The Wives They Left Behind, and that's by Corson and Trento, Susan Trento and Joseph Trento. That is an excellent book. It's called Widows, and there are three authors there who really tell about how the Army and the military murder their own. And there are books like William Hoffman and Lake Headley, Headley's book, Contract Killer, which tells about the military's involvement with the mafia, what the most notorious mafia hitman, Donald Tony the Greek Franco's, and he was supposed to have murdered Hoffa, but it tells how the military, his training in the military, really enabled him to not spend any time in prison and to make friends with police officers. And in other words, these guys, and I'm not saying because they're white, but generally if they're African American, or women, we're way down on the totem pole, so Marilyn Monroe or Martha Mitchell or, Mary Myers or,
Sure.
just neutralize us, or the blacks, or Martha Stewart. But
yeah, what do you know about Martha Stewart?
Well, she fired, and I'm not anti-homosexuals either. I just don't like it when they rape little boys like my husband,
Right.
and Oswald. But she was targeted by this homosexual whom she fired. And
really?
they're really rage-filled people when they don't like women. They don't like women who have power. Look at the Roman Catholic Church, what they did to the Cathars.
Well, let's go back to the late 1970s when homosexual radicals, I'm not talking about all homosexuals,
right.
homosexual radicals fought and succeeded in destroying the most obvious common sense kinds of public health policies we should have immediately adopted to deal with HIV/AIDS. They destroyed them.
Yeah.
And that resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. They demanded, they bribed, they forced our public health policies to reconfigure themselves to treat HIV/AIDS as a social disease. To this day, we have no legal right to know who is or who is not infected and carrying up to 30 opportunistic diseases. We do not have the right to know.
Isn't that strange?
However, if someone has syphilis, they're tracked, they're identified, all their contacts are traced, but not HIV/AIDS. So, yes, we go back. You're right. There is a homosexual rage among certain members of that community, the radicals. They are absolutely responsible for a catastrophe in this country.
And it's the same reason that they don't let people know in Virginia who the child pedophiles are. This, the pedophile group is very, they're involved with some of the homosexuals, and police officers like the one Shorty Satterwhite, who was a Marine, who was a known homosexual in the Virginia Beach Police Department, who was assigned to me with the house break-ins, and I found out, not only was he homosexual, but he had served as a Marine for 20 years. And the FBI guy, the same thing happened where I called the FBI, and there was Dan McNally, and found out that he was a Cherry Marine, and he had served under Al Gray. And, it's kind of as though the pedophiles, you can't find out who the pedophiles are, these priests. Like David Ferry, he'd been outed as a pedophile priest in Illinois, but he was sent down to New Orleans, and he was recruiting and raping little boys. And if you read William Manchester's book, The Arms of Krupp, William Manchester was a very bright Marine.
He's a great writer.
Yeah, and this book, The Arms of Krupp, will tell readers, people who don't believe about the German disease and the high command being this way, just read the arms of Krupp and what went on the Isle of Capri.
Well, all right.
So,
stand by. I'll break at the bottom of the hour here. Come back. 2 more segments to go with Kay Griggs. And if anyone wants to call in, we're on delay many places, but some of you are listening certainly live right now. Many, in fact. If you want to call in with a question, perhaps, 800-259-9231. 800-259-9231. A lot of sharp folks listening out there now, and if you want to ask this brave lady something, go ahead, give us a ring. 800-259-9231. Back to Kay Griggs. September 11th, the amount of data piling up now, which not only refutes but makes an utter mockery of the government's lousy, transparent attempt to cover this great crime up, is about the size of Mount Everest now. There's a lot of disinformation out there, but in general, this thing reeks. Any idea who planned it, who carried it out from your perspective? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I know that there were a couple of operations that began exactly that day.
Yeah, there were, I think, 4 altogether, believe it or not.
Yeah, and one of them was run out of Tampa by the second in command, a Marine, and the head guy just happened to be away.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the Joint Chiefs, the head, happened to be away, and a Marine was running that. I think it was called Bright Star, very Masonic, and it involved, people getting in planes and thinking that they were playing a game.
Right.
And some of my friends around here who have married guys like George feel that, do you remember the Justice Department number 2 guy whose wife was on one of those planes?
Right.
They feel that possibly these guys were working for the Tampa German. In other words, it was there was a German involvement with ATA and so forth. And I know that
he was over there for a while.
Well, my husband had these Germans over one of the times just before he left, and this was a very high-level Bundestag member, and they're all involved with operations because operations are income-producing, and they're fun, quote unquote. They think they're fun, and they're planned in Suffolk. We have a huge game room for military and civilian boys who haven't grown up, and they planned a number of the Twin Towers being hit by planes, and I think that's everybody knows about these operations. And there was one in London that went on exactly the same day in the same tube station and the same bus. Which these are not games that are just. These are real operations.
Right. This was a big time program.
Absolutely, it was, without a question.
Yeah, no question. Everybody seems to know it, but Americans.
Well, even on the street here, they know it.
Well, they're intuitively waking up.
But that way
the
in
Europeans.
Virginia, I don't know one adult person who doesn't believe that 911 was an inside job.
Inside and outside the military.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, Europeans have been well ahead of us on this, but America has awakened as much as it's probably going to. There's a tremendous groundswell of revulsion and disgust by this. Do you see these killers I've said it before. I don't think they're ever going to give up willingly on their control. I think they'll take as much of us and as much of the planet down with them as they can before giving it up. Do you agree?
Well, that's what I'm afraid of. I mean, if you have people, robotic Manchurian candidates, like a Schoonmaker, this able danger, and you've got committees led by Marine Duck and Hunter and guys like John Lehman, who what he was doing at Tailhook, and I mean Tim Romer and his reputation. My goodness, and you've got people who have things to hide, like Gilmore, and you have them overseeing 911.
Right.
There's
I know. It's
a problem.
Look, when they named Henry Kissinger, I mean, the game was obvious, and that ended it right there. All right, let's take a few calls from folks here who have some questions for you. Let's go to San Francisco and say hello to Julian. Hi, Julian. Thanks for listening. What's your question for Kay Griggs?
Yeah, great show and great guest tonight, Jeff.
Thank you, sir.
My question for Kay is, how far does she think the Valerie Plame grand jury investigation will go in Chicago?
Well, I think it depends on the guy who's in charge, and what kind of pressure that they put on him. I think
Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Illinois is quite a place. One for the Democrats and the Republicans, and if there's any pressure to be applied to him, it certainly will be. And they'll get rid of a son. They tried to get Gore's son. They made threats against Perot's daughter.
Well, Gore's son, by the way, married the granddaughter of Jacob Schiff.
Isn't that
Talk about
amazing?
an Illuminati wedding.
Exactly. Protecting.
Man.
Yeah, that's
Unreal.
Protecting him.
Well, we don't know, Julian, and the bottom line is these indictments, if they're real and there's evidence to suggest that they are quite real, they may never go anywhere. They just could be buried.
Exactly.
We just don't know, and there's so much, again, power and pressure, and the power is life and death here. A couple phone calls and these things just don't move. That's my feeling.
Yeah.
But,
well, thank you for taking my call.
Thanks very much for being out there and caring. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right, in New York, Posey has called in. Hello, Posey. Welcome.
Hi.
What's your question?
I heard you I just tuned in and I heard you talking about the homosexuals, and I was wondering if you ever heard of the Saturn Project.
Spell it.
It's Saturn, like the planet Saturn Project.
Saturn. Ever heard of the Saturn Project?
No, I haven't. But I've heard a lot about some of the various ones that are involved with the. There are a number of books and so forth. The expert on that is Colonel Ron Ray, who wrote a book called Military Necessity and Homosexuality.
Oh, really? That's Colonel Ron Ray.
That's an excellent book from a Marine telling about it. There's another excellent one.
Give the title again, Kay.
It's Military Necessity and Homosexuality.
Wow.
Published in Louisville, Kentucky, First Principles Press, 1993, by Colonel Ronald D. Ray, U.S. Marine Corps.
All right, write that down.
There's another excellent book. I believe it's Randy Shilts, S-H-I-L-T-S book, S-H-I-L-T-S, called Conduct Unbecoming, about gays and lesbians in the U.S. military. St. Martin's Press, 1993.
Mm-hmm. The bottom line is there's a ton of material out there, Posey.
There's lots.
And Saturn Project may have been one of many. We don't know, but it is being used to control, manipulate, and usurp the individuality of too many people, unfortunately. And not just a lifestyle issue, it's a political tool now.
Yes, well, everything that's involved, every human trait is being used against us.
You got it, my friend. Thanks for the call.
That's what they were looking for.
Yes,
Take care.
Thank you. I will break and come right back with Kay Griggs in just a couple of minutes. welcome back. And again, our phone number, we have a couple callers on hold. 1-800-259-9231. 800-259-9231. Kay Griggs, my guest tonight. Conversation part 2. The first one is in the archives on August 3rd. In L.A., Ray has called in. Hi, Ray. Welcome.
Hi.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, hi. I was wanting to ask a couple things. I guess I'll just throw these questions out. And
just one at a time, please.
Okay. Well, first of all, I was wondering about, because Bohemian Grove just passed by their annual little, ditty that they do, and there was a short blurb either in the San Francisco Gate or the San Francisco Examiner about Colin Powell being up there, and they made some reference to, like, that maybe he's like one of the regular boys now, that he's associated with some big company that goes up there.
Oh yeah, he's sure. They all go to corporate retirement. They sit on the boards of directors and so on. He, no doubt, attends the Bohemian Grove. It doesn't mean that he is necessarily into the debauchery. But Kay Griggs knows a lot about the Grove, and tell us what you can here in a few minutes, Kay.
Well, there's one in. I'm sure there are others like that, but Montauk Point is a playground for the Montauk Club in Brooklyn. And Bohemian Grove is a playground for members of the Bohemian Club in San Francisco. And historically, these are places where the boys romp and play, and prostitutes are brought in. It's like the Goat Club here in Norfolk, the Saints and Sinners, the FBI and Norfolk's Law and Disorderly Club, where they literally bring prostitutes in from Baltimore, Maryland, and, they're nude and they have a fur coat on, and they bring a baby goat, and give them to the winners of each golf hole. And the boys, these are the good old boys who run Virginian politics, which is the most important state other than New York. Harry Byrd, who controlled the purse, Pat Robertson's father, controlled the, Senate finance committees and so forth. So when you have men who are ruling, and you bring in, they're either having affairs with men or with other women, or they're sadistic things that occur, or just, having little skull sessions.
Right, they dress up in robes.
They dress up like women. The Hasty Pudding group at Harvard, my former brother-in-law, who's a CIA operative, they dress up like girls, and they get drunk, and first of all, it's not fair, because you don't have a lot of African Americans, or even a few. You don't have women and wives, and of course you know what's going to go on.
Yeah, it's an old boys club. But I had heard an interview with John DeCamp. Are you familiar with his book?
Yes.
And they were mentioning that Colin Powell, there's been some murmurs, but he seems to be very touchy about naming any names on the air, because I guess he had a lawsuit that he won. But the other thing I wanted to pick your see what you thought about, and maybe you might have touched on this, but I missed it, was the whole vicious firing or demoting of General Byron, and what you think of that Colonel Schaefer that's been on the news the last day or two.
Coming out.
Yeah.
Well, very often they do damage control, and one has to wonder what, are they covering something up? Is
he a whitewater, or is he legitimate?
Yeah, because Kurt Weldon is there where one of the joint bases is at Willow Grove, and knowing that all of this information, the diagram was out a year before 9/11, and they had the whole diagram already, and there were certain quote-unquote lawyers who didn't let it go to the FBI. I know the FBI knew at the highest level in Washington, but,
it seems like so many times along the way, the CIA or somebody, along the trail of these guys, told everyone to leave them alone,
Well, this is how it's done. It's like Oliver Buck Revell. You have a Marine, who knew all the good old boys, and he romped in wherever he was romping in Marseille with the guys and, the nudist parties around the pool. And the secretaries leave at 11, and then you've got the guys who are there, and the insider guys like Buck Revell, a Marine. He gets into the FBI. He has an hour or two long session with Herbert Hoover, the longest of anybody in a closed room with Herbert Hoover, who's gay. And, we've heard about Tom Clancy being that way, and
supposedly on the inside with a lot of those people. Yeah,
and so you have someone who was that way in the military, like Rock Hudson, like there's so many of them, Jim Nabors, who were recruited homosexually in the Navy, and then they're put on the fast track in Hollywood. So this is how it's done, and if you understand the architecture of it, you can pretty much just guess, or at least, it's not necessarily true in all cases, but I believe it's more often than not.
I think most of us get it. It's just, having to prove it to a lot of other people that are too scared to face it.
Why are they afraid? I mean, we're all going to die. We're all mortal. And my feeling is we've got a flag in Virginia that has a warrior, a female warrior standing atop a guy with a crown who's falling off. And I think that women can be just as brave as men. Look at Marilyn Monroe with her diary. Look at Martha Mitchell going on the phone and having that Marine tear it off the wall.
I'd much rather have women in charge. I'd feel
mothers. I think that we need mothers in charge. Strong-willed ones who were, I think that Condi Rice is okay, but, look at her background with Madeleine Albright's father, and she's not, you wonder, she doesn't have the life experiences, and good fathers, a lot of these guys, like, Rummy, when Wolfowitz was retiring and going to the World Bank, there wasn't one single wife at that retirement ceremony. It could have been held at Bohemian Grove.
Yeah, interesting.
So that's my take.
What do you think's the real scoop behind the General Byrne? He was supposed to. He's the commanding general over at the.
At Fort Monroe. They were trying
fourth highest general. I think
reputation.
Yeah.
He was.
It seems like there's some infighting. It seems like all
the Americans against the German. Israeli,
right. So there are factions.
We're fighting a battle for our nation's culture and
those lawyers
the founding forefathers' beliefs in civilian control of government and having the right.
They wouldn't believe what's happened here now at all. Ray, we've got to go. I want to get one more call.
Okay, thanks a lot for answering.
You bet. Thanks for calling in. Let's go to New York real quickly. George, we only have a couple of minutes. What's your question?
Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
Hi, Kay. I love that name. It's my mother's name.
All right, go ahead.
She graduated. Catherine.
Yeah, Catherine, right. Yeah. She graduated from Columbia in the 30s. Yeah, really brainwashed,
Yeah.
She passed on 7/7, which was the London Day in 50, right?
Oh, my gosh.
I was glad. I sort of think I was there, half of me at least.
Sure.
But all this stuff that's been laid on you, George, your husband, and others, I feel sorry for us all.
I know.
I think we're going to get over it some way if we can forgive ourselves.
That's exactly what we need to do is have light on, have people be able to say, this happened. Guys not to be afraid to say, my priest raped me, the general raped me, And,
right, but this
in South Africa.
Hey, this could have happened in a better environment. The doors that were open could have been opened in the sacrament of holy matrimony. The thing in itself was not totally evil. Part of it was. And that's the way I feel. I don't want to pontificate, but I know the hour's running out. And I've been listening. I'm suffering from the chemtrail flus a little bit.
Oh, my gosh.
All right, just have about a minute left, George, if you have a direct question.
I wanted to give Jeff, over the years, I hear many things about you. things have surfaced. I'm behind you. You're a gentleman, like Martin Luther King said, by the context of your character.
Thank you.
You are a gentleman. Hey,
Thank you, sir.
One thing on Casey, you know, the son of Cindy down there, he was born on JFK's birthday. Died at 29, and he died on Martin Luther King's day.
I met Martin Luther King and talked to him when I was about 18 years old.
What a man. He was in his late 30s. What a genius.
Yeah.
I mean, what a gentleman. I don't care where he went. I mean, you know, you got to put yourself in the context of the character of where we were. Oh,
that's right. That's exactly right.
That's why you're such a gentleman, Jeff. God bless you. Anything anybody says about you, I don't listen.
Thank you, George. Thank you.
And they're our families.
Indeed. Thank you, George. And God bless you, too. And God bless you, too, Kay Griggs, for being who you are. Wow, what an amazing person you are, and you carry on, young lady, because we need people like you, as you well know, and you have people out there listening who are hanging on every word, and they're very wise Americans.
Well, read. John Marks, The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, or Tom Bowers, The Paperclip Conspiracy. There are lots of wonderful books out there by people like me who've been on the inside, and they really feel as though they need a voice. A wonderful one is Anthony Sutton's book.
Oh, yeah.
He died in 2002, entitled America's Secret Establishment.
It's a monumental book, Anthony Sutton. Thank you again,
You're
Kay.
welcome.
If I can do anything...
God bless you all, and God bless this country.
Indeed. Good night.
Good night.
And, she's going to be around. This is an amazing woman. Please listen to the first interview in the archives if you can on August 3rd. And we covered a lot of the same things tonight, but so much more. Wow. It's great to know there's still people like that with courage, patriotism, and heart. And there are a lot of you out there. And I thank all of you for being with us tonight. And we'll be back in 21 hours.